The million-dollar question. Can anyone write a bestseller? And if so, how? Author Suzy K. Quinn has some rather unusual answers to these and other related questions. I actually stumbled upon Suzy on the Creative Pen podcast. I took her course How to Write a Bestseller on Mark Dawson's self-publishing formula, and I had to invite her over to my podcast. Unlike many other how-to gurus, Suzy has actually walked the walk. She has published 21 novels and has sold millions of copies of her books and reached bestseller status with several of her series. So, Suzy knows what she's talking about. Plus, she's really interesting, humble, and a great person to chat with. In this podcast episode, you'll learn what a bestseller is, and if there really is a formula to writing a bestseller. How your book can be successful without a ton of advertising and marketing efforts. Why we are taught writing the wrong way basically everywhere. How to allow your book to be original and still focused on the market. How to know if you have a great book idea. The single most important ingredient in a best-selling book. And much more. Are you ready to dive in? Let's do this.
I'm Suzy K. Quinn. I've sold nearly 1 million books now, ebooks, and my journey into writing has been really bumpy. I did the traditional route where I was a young author, really desperately trying to get published, trying to get an agent, sending out manuscripts to agents and publishers, getting rejection letters and all that kind of thing. And then when I finally did get an agent, I got a big publishing deal. It felt really exciting and wonderful. I got a big advance. And then it kind of didn't go so well. So after that, I have learned a lot about books and writing. And I've learned there's a difference between what publishers like. Sometimes sometimes a difference between what publishers like and what readers like sometimes. And what's really important is to know what the readers want at the end of the day. I mean, obviously you want to get both if you can. And I have written probably in every genre except for children's books, and I'm going to write that next. So I've written romance, thrillers, comedy, kind of more literary thrillers, all sorts of things. So yeah, I'm very kind of, what's the word, where you can't sit still, and I'm busy. I'm a very busy writer.
Suzy's course is called How to Write a Bestseller. What an exciting topic. And don't we all want to know how to do this? But first, let's define the word bestseller.
There's lots of different definitions, but I think I and probably the publishing industry would define a bestseller as selling around about 100,000 copies. So as far as I'm aware, and someone might correct me on this, but there isn't exactly an official definition exactly, but a bestseller would be around about that. So around 100,000 copies. So some people count it now if you get a bestseller badge on Amazon, but you can actually do that quite easily. So depending on the category. So it's lovely to get one of those badges, but really we're talking about a big quantity of books, and you can really make a living from your writing.
But is it really that simple? Is there a formula to write a bestseller?
Even when I ask bestseller writers, they tell me, okay, there's a good portion of luck included. Yeah. So what's your take on that?
So that's a really good question, Dana. And my take on it is, I think you make your own luck. And I think you make your own luck by working hard, by being consistent. So the course covers some kind of real key ingredients that writers aren't really taught, to do with coming at books a different way around. So instead of kind of sitting down and just kind of letting your imagination run away with you, which is fun and wonderful, it's looking at it in a more sort of structured way, looking at it more, what am I delivering to readers? Are readers going to get what they want at the end of it? Are they going to be confused by what I'm by the story at the end of it? Or are they going to understand by the time I finish the book, okay, so the book is titled, this, and so that makes me understand it's a comedy and it's going to deliver these sorts of things. Because when you don't deliver the right things to readers, no matter how amazing your book is, if readers think they're getting one thing and they get something else, they'll feel disappointed and they won't read more of your books. So that's kind of the formulaic aspect, should we say, in the course. I do understand what you're saying, and there is definitely intuition and some kind of, I guess, connection with kind of zeitgeist, you could say, or other human beings. There's connections that you make when you're writing that you can't exactly prescribe. But I would say if you sit down and you write every day for at least an hour, it should be more, and you have a focus on what you're writing and you know who you're writing for and you continue, then you kind of can't fail to write a bestseller. You kind of can't fail. It's just a question of when. So when writers talk about luck, it feels a lot of the time when things happen when you're writing, you feel like, yeah, actually that was really lucky how those circumstances came together. But you're actually forgetting about all the hard work you've put up until that point. So you might not know exactly how it's going to happen. Probably the road will surprise you. It certainly surprised me of how I ended up writing best-selling books. But it will happen. If you keep putting in the work and focusing, it will happen. You just have faith and just wait. And no one can tell you when, but it will happen.
The pivotal point for Suzy came after a long struggle, when she finally understood that the marketing, the most essential part of marketing, actually started with book writing itself.
My first book that was published, I took it must have been 2 years to write it, something like that. I did loads of research. It was called Glass Geishas. It was focused in the Japanese hostessing industry. I did the traditional publisher route. I sent it to an agent and the agent sent it to a publisher and all that kind of thing. And it sold about 10,000 copies. And a lot of those copies were to do with my own marketing, because I kind of went crazy doing ebook marketing. And a lot of the ebooks sold, whereas the print book didn't sell so well. And I was really, really disappointed, because I really felt like, oh, now I've got a publisher and I've got this advance. Everything's going to happen for me now. And so when it didn't work out like that, it was kind of devastating, really. It was really heartbreaking. So after I wrote that book, I kind of had a real thing, and I had to work out, okay, what's gone wrong here? Why didn't this book sell, And around about the same time, 50 Shades of Grey was really popular. And I was sort of like, okay, so I don't understand, why are people liking this book and not this book, And I really started to study and read lots. I mean, I'd already, obviously, every writer reads lots of bestsellers, right? But I really kind of methodically started going through every bestseller of, the mega best-selling books, and worked out kind of like formulas and patterns and things and what was happening. And then I wrote a book. Well, essentially, I then wrote a book called The Ivy Lessons, which was a romance. And my publishers wouldn't accept it. So I self-published it. And it just kind of went crazy. I didn't do any advertising. I didn't do any Facebook. People always ask, oh, you must be on Facebook all day. No, I'm not. And I wasn't. And I kind of worked out that combination of the kind of the title and the messages. And when readers really understand, okay, I'm going to get this kind of book, it's going to deliver this for me. And now I feel happy, because it's a romance. I can see by the cover it's a romance, and I know I'm going to get X, Y, and Z. And so I really then started to work out kind of these patterns, and how to create products, because books are products, in a way that readers will be happy with what they're getting and will understand the messages. I do advertise now, but without having to do too much advertising, you can really appeal to readers, because when we're all the same, right? If you go into a bookshop and you see a book with a really exciting cover and title, and you understand what it's going to be, and you're, kind of attracted to it, it sells itself. You don't have to do all that much. And then people will tell their friends about it, So I hope that's answered the question.
And in her course, Suzy says that we're basically taught writing the wrong way. And we're taught that way everywhere. So what is this wrong way, and how can we do it the right way?
So what writers tend to do, and what I definitely did with my first book, was I had this very kind of high idea, about the hostessing industry that I wanted to write about in Japan. I wanted to write about Japanese culture. I was really interested in the Japanese sex industry, which is really kind of funny. It's a really funny thing, the Japanese sex industry. And I was just really interested by it. And then I had these characters in this story. And so I just kind of put it all together without thinking about what kind of book it was. Is it a thriller? Is it a romance? It kind of had a bit of everything, really. And it didn't have a reader focus. So when we came to publish the book, obviously I was really happy, incredibly grateful that my publisher bought that book, really, really grateful. But when we came to do the cover, there were two really different options for the cover. There was a thriller option, which kind of had it was like red and black and kind of, I don't think it was a knife, but it was a really sort of dynamic kind of dark cover. And then there was a sort of women's fiction type cover, which was all pastel colors and Japanese kind of artwork and things. So 2 completely different covers for the same book. And that should have told me really how confused my story was, if we couldn't even come up with a clear focus for the cover. So I now understand better, and I think writers should be taught this, that before you start writing, before you spend all that time writing, 100,000 words or however many words you're going to write, start with a rough idea of a title, how you can imagine your book looking in the bookshop, and that kind of thing. There's loads of details on this in the course, but it's basically to do with making sure your book is focused and clear for readers.
Suzy really opts for thinking about the marketing first, and especially about your target audience. And most authors, I think nearly all authors I know, never think about that. I know I didn't when I started to write my first book. And I know many authors don't even think about the genre, because actually genre is the target audience, because the audience in terms of fiction books is determined by genre lovers. So we don't even think about the distinct genre we want to write in and the kind of people we are writing this book for. But then, what about artistic expression? What about originality? Do we always have to only write to market? And can we bring our unique originality and something different into the book and still think about genre and be able to put it into some kind of box? Do we actually need a box? Or can we be free spirits and artists who just express their originality?
So it's a great question, and I think it's about a balance. And there's a Greek myth that basically, I think it's Ulysses, has to sail between 2 kind of like, I think it's the sirens on one side and something else on the other side, and he has to sail through the middle. And I read this in a book called Bestseller, and it's basically about balancing. You have a plan and a focus, but you hold on to it quite lightly, and you leave room and space for ideas to come, and so you're able to let your book breathe as well. So don't overplan and keep it too rigid. If you come up with this amazing title at the beginning, but as you start to write, things change, it's okay. You can change things. So I would say it's just kind of holding on to that focus, but just not too tightly. And if you do that, that creative side, that kind of freedom where ideas just come from nowhere, there's still room for that, would be my answer.
So basically, it's not quenching your creativity. And that is actually what I always say, that your creativity flourishes with limits. If you give it a problem, if you give it some limits that are not too rigid, your creativity starts to flourish. So don't be afraid to consider the market, to consider your target reader before you write, because you will still have room for originality and for creativity. But what about the beginning of the process? If you have many ideas, or if you even have one good idea, how do you actually know that it has best-selling material inside?
Do you know what I used to do? Is I used to put up a Facebook ad for my book ideas. So I used to have a title, a rough idea, and then I put up a Facebook ad to see how many clicks it got, to get an understanding, like how popular is this. Sadly for me, Facebook stopped me doing that, which was kind of fair enough. I mean, I probably shouldn't have, I always directed it to a sort of a similar type of book. So I'd sell another author's book. So I felt kind of morally okay. It's okay because some other author is going to get some clicks. But anyway, so that's what I used to do. Now I ask people, I talk to people, but there is also a kind of a sense of, as a reader, we're all readers, you just kind of know, sometimes you feel stuff like that title's great. When I look at that title, it's great. And you also know when something's not quite great, but you kind of want it to be, but it's not quite there. So, I mean, I would say, you've got something really winning when you can really easily imagine a book cover for it, really easily. And when you talk about, say, the title, people understand what the book's going to be about, and that, I think you're onto something quite good. But I have to say, there's no guarantees in this. There still is not any guarantees, but what we do have is giving ourselves the very best chance. So we're taking away a lot more uncertainty than we used to have.
Give yourself the best chance to succeed. Let the packaging, so the title and the cover of the book, give you a focus where to direct your book when you're writing it. Common advice out there is that an author should stick to one genre, or at least related genres in order to make it and to be successful, because you have a reader base and they expect you to write in that genre. But Suzy has actually proven quite the opposite. She has written in so many genres. What's her secret and how does she do it?
When I started off, I sort of experimented with doing pen names, but it just kind of drove me crazy, really, because then you have like different websites and different Twitter accounts and all that kind of thing. So just for my own sanity, I have my own, just one name. I think what you should probably do as an author in an ideal world is stick to one genre and just do that, and just do over and to kind of like excited by all, you know, by all the different books you can do. And so you probably shouldn't bounce around the way I do, but what I tend to do to balance it a bit more is I tend to write series. So that way you kind of giving readers a bit of consistency. So my Bad Mothers series is a parenting comedy, and I've written, I think it's like 7 books in that series. And then my Ivy Lesson series, I think there were 7 books in that series. So even though they're different, I try to create, something that's got some consistency. And in terms of readers, taking readers with you, some come with you and some don't. So, but I still advertise to all of them in the same way. So I'd say probably maybe half of them will say, I read everything that you do. I love your thrillers. And then probably the other half will say, I really don't like thrillers. I only like the romance. Could you please do more of that? So there you go. So I think the honest answer is you probably should just stick to one genre, but I don't.
To round this up, what would be the most important ingredient, the one focus, if a book wants to be a bestseller?
Given that there's always going to be more than one, but probably the single most important thing is clarity, something really clear to readers. So when they look at the book, they say, I know what that story is about. And I either want to read that story or I don't, but it's clear. So it's not a kind of muddy, I'm trying to think of some, if you look in the Amazon charts, you'll see so many books that you think, I don't know what that is. I just don't know. It could be this kind of book or that kind of book, or maybe the cover looks like a thriller, but I don't know about the title, and the title, I don't really know what the story is going to be about by that title. If you can get something that's really clear, a really clear idea, that's really what it comes down to, a kind of a short, snappy idea that you can say really quickly, like this book is about, a shark killing people in a holiday resort, then you're good. And that's one of the biggest problems I think we have as authors, is we write our amazing, beautiful books, and then we go to the publishers, and the publisher has decided this year, that vampire books, should we say, are really popular. And because your book has a vampire in it, they're going to make it look like the other vampire books. But the truth is your story doesn't really have a lot to do with vampires. So when readers read it, they feel, okay, that didn't really match what I wanted. So now I feel disappointed. Yeah, so everything should definitely match up completely.
So now we talked a lot about packaging, marketing, thinking about the marketing and genre. But what about craft? What about the knowledge of storytelling principles and how good you are as an author in terms of mastering the storytelling craft?
So the vocabulary and the types of words that we're using, I don't actually think that's important. I think it's a nice bonus. I think a lot of people in the publishing industry really judge the quality and the weight of language. I don't think readers find it as important. Obviously, the ideal is to have both if you can. There's so many books that are very lightly written that are bestsellers. In terms of knowledge of stories, I think it's a really good idea to have read lots of fairy tales, lots of myths and legends, and just lots and lots and lots of stories, just reading lots of stories. And subconsciously, all that pattern will sink in, because there are patterns in stories and we do expect things from stories. And it's tricky because I know we want to be original and not to kind of follow like a recipe, but at the same time, stories are talking to something inside of us, a subconscious part of us, and we want to make sure we're delivering what readers want from the story and what their subconscious expects. It's really interesting you were saying about the hero's journey and how it can be useful for creativity, because I usually, when I'm planning a story, I have files that are like the hero crossing the threshold, things like that. and it sparks interesting ideas. So I like that part, the kind of the generating ideas. But I mean, what I really love is when I've got going with the story and it's like flying, you know, you're not thinking, you're just, you know, nothing else matters. You're just writing the story. And when you've got a character you really enjoy being with, that's really important. I mean, that's another thing, you know, readers fall in love with characters a lot more than words, you know. So, you know, when you've got a character that you're really enjoying being with and seeing their relationships, that's really enjoyable.
Now on to Suzy's process. How much planning is actually involved? As I know from the course, she obviously plans the tagline and the title and the cover in advance. But what about the story? How much is planned beforehand and how much is just gardening as you go?
Do you know what? I always thought I was a planning writer. I really did think I was a planning writer because I'm so organized. I'm so, you know, kind of bit crazy controlling, really. But actually, I think I more get the idea as long as the idea is good. So with the Ivy lessons, the idea was basically, I thought, like a teacher and a student having an affair. And that was just, oh, wow, I can think of like so many scenes for that. So I just started writing and I kind of almost went back and forth and, you know, put in this kind of sort of Cinderella story around it. And it just sort of happened, really, that story. And that was one of my best-selling stories. And with The Bad Mother's Diary, I just kind of had all this funny stuff happening. I just had a kid, so I was, you know, there was all this stuff that I thought was amusing. And so I just started writing a kind of funny mum's point of view, and it just sort of grew into a story. So when I've outlined, I have to say it's not made much difference because I think outlines change a lot, don't they? So for me, the planning part comes at the beginning when I have a focus and an idea. And then I kind of use things like the hero's journey to kind of roughly structure a book. So I have 3 acts, you know, so I know that in the first act, we're setting everything up. The second act, we're having a lot of things going wrong. And the third act, it's kind of bringing everything together again. And then I use so the hero's journey, I'll generally use to sort of analyze the book at the end, by and large. Sorry, it's not a very clear answer, but I should be clear by now, should I? How many books? 21 books in, I should know, but it is different as well from different books. Thrillers I structure more because there's a mystery at the end to be solved.
And I actually love this approach because it shows that every book kind of has its own approach and there's no rigid formula to writing a book. It's different for every author and it's different for actually every book and genre that you write. But you can get ideas and get inspiration from what other authors do and create your own routine from that. So, the $5 billion question. Can everybody write a bestseller?
Yes. I kind of think yes. I really do. The real trick really with writing is, can you do it again? You know, I do honestly think everyone can write a bestseller. I think everyone's got something unique or interesting about themselves and their life that people want to read about in one way or another. And if you put the work in and you have faith, it will happen. Can everyone have a career as a writer? And again, I think, yeah, but it's really about how much you want it. You have to really want it. Really, really, because everyone talks, don't they, about writing with, oh, you know, you get rejections and stuff. And you kind of, I remember when I was younger, you kind of going into it like, yeah, I can take the rejections. But it's hard because it saps your self-esteem and you start thinking, am I right for this? Should I carry on doing this? And it's really, you know, it's harder than you expect. So if you really want it, you'll do it. It's my answer.
And here's where time comes into play, what we talked about in the beginning of the interview, that you don't know how long it's going to take you to write a bestseller or to write again a new bestseller. And this is kind of the trick behind all of this. How much do you want it? And how hard do you actually want to persevere? Because time is one of the greatest ingredients that you have to put into the equation. And now the most important question. What's Suzy's favorite story and why?
I'm kind of tempted to say Cinderella because it's such a good structure. But in terms of a story, I actually, there's a British book called The Secret Diary of Adrian Mole. The title does not advertise itself well of what's in the book. But anyway, so it's a really, really funny, warm sort of family diary, really incredibly cleverly written. So I guess probably that's a better example of writing I like rather than a story, but I do love the story as well, and it's just a sort of gentle kind of soap opera. Yeah, and I still read their book now, so I guess that's my favorite book, and Cinderella is my favorite story because it appears everywhere all the time.
Now let's sum up the amazing interview. Marketing starts with the writing process. While you're planning your book, think about title, package, and your target reader, your target market. Be very clear about this because your package has to communicate in a very clear way the message that it delivers. In order to keep your originality and artistry, don't be too rigid. This marketing consideration is your focus, but you are still allowed to be spontaneous and creative and bring in this flow into the process while you hold on to that focus. How do you know you have a great idea? Well, when you can really easily imagine a book cover for it and set a title. If you want to balance multiple genres like Suzy does, you should write in a series and give it some kind of consistency. The most important part when you want to write a bestseller is clarity. That when the reader sees the cover and reads the title, she knows what the book is about and if she'd like to read it or not. And the inside, the story itself, obviously has to fulfill that promise. The mastering of storytelling craft is no less important. The knowledge of myths and lots of stories, the understanding of the 3-act structure and the hero's journey. Everybody can write a bestseller, but how much do you actually want it? Are you willing to persevere through hardships, put in the work? Writing a bestseller is not a stroke of luck, but you make your own luck with hard work, doing the right things and learning, and perseverance. And now, where can we find Suzy and everything that she does online?
My bestseller course is part of the Mark Dawson school. It's the self-publishing formula. He does this whole school of amazing courses. I've taken his Facebook course. It's fantastic. And so I'm really proud to be part of those courses. And so my little course is part of that group. So it's the Suzy K. Quinn How to Write a Bestseller course, part of the self-publishing formula. And then my own books are just Suzy K. Quinn. I've got my website, and I do all sorts of different things. And by the way, I'm writing, my next series is going to be a children's series set in Germany. So yes, I'm kind of excited to do that one.
The interview with Suzy was a real pleasure, and I can only emphasize again, if you want to write a bestseller and learn a new way of how to approach writing a book, you should definitely check out her course with the self-publishing formula. Please don't forget to rate my show on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube. Subscribe to the channel, and next time I'll be reading the beginning of my newest non-fiction book that will be published on the 1st of February, The Business-Minded Creative. And hopefully I see you back there.